Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard are not expected to receive like that. Where is their fantasy value? We'll hit on that, plus other hot news around the NFC on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst for NFL Network.
I'm your other host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today, Vinny and I are going to talk through the top news and rumors around the NFC. So hitting on all the fun NFC team news as we approach the NFL Combine later this week. We hit on all the AFC news yesterday. So if you missed that, go listen to that after today's show. Let's start right at the top here because we got some running back news as we are approaching free agency. So Saquon Barkley of the Giants and Tony Pollard of the Cowboys, both NFC East teams here that we're dealing with, are not expected to be franchise tagged. So they're going to be a free agent. What would be the best landing spot for both of these guys in terms of their fantasy value, Vinny?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it a little bit at sportingnews.com. You can check it. I do a little bit of matching game with these guys. I'll start with Tony Pollard because that was the guy that seems a little bit more obvious. He does have Kellen Moore now in Philadelphia. They were not too pleased with DeAndre Swift last year. He couldn't hold up. And they have Kenneth Gainwell behind him. And then Swift is a free agent as well as Boston Scott. So you could blow up this backfield in Philadelphia. He knows this offense. He had his best season. This is why he got the franchise tag playing for Kellen Moore and that rushing attack. We know can still be special. There's some questions we'll see about Jason Kelce up front. They do have to start rebuilding that offensive line, but it's still going to be good, even if Kelce steps away right now. It looks like he might return. So that'd be a really great system for Tony Pollard to be in there and reuniting with Kellen Moore, and makes a lot of sense there for the Eagles who have a need there. Saquon Barkley is an interesting one, Michelle. This is a little bit tougher to break down. I mean, I could see it in the Chargers backfield right now because you see some of the comments with Greg Roman. They want to maybe diversify their passing game as well as add a power runner. So when you look at Saquon Barkley, I think the Chargers have Austin Eckler. I think they want a more traditional back in that lead role who has some pop to reel off some long runs here, can also power through the tackles a little bit better. Saquon could hold up, and I think the Chargers will probably pair him with someone there. Keep in mind, not just Eckler, but Joshua Kelly is a free agent as well. So they could be blowing up that backfield. So we talked about Josh Jacobs potentially going to the Cowboys, Derrick Henry to the Ravens. It's looking like all these free agent big-name running backs are going to be switching teams, Michelle.
There's a lot of teams that need running back. So it's good news for these guys that are free agents. Now, I don't know if they're going to get paid because it just doesn't seem like that's the way this market's going for running backs. But so many running back needy teams and not a lot of good running backs in this draft class. So these guys are going to find starting roles, right? And Tony Pollard, I just feel like the thing with him is he was in such a great situation this past year on an offense that was scoring so many points. You would think that Tony Pollard would have been so much better for fantasy. I mean, we were all drafting him high. One singular top 5 running back finish this year, and it was in week 1. And then he only had one other top 10 finish the rest of the year. Running back 9 1 week. A lot of just so many terrible weeks. But I do think he lands in a spot where he could get, if he wants to, he could get a lot of volume again. I mean, I think the Bengals might be moving on from Joe Mixon. The Vikings need a lead running back. The Texans do. The Ravens do. The Vikings, like there's so many teams here. Now the Cowboys, obviously that's not where Pollard will be because they're not going to tag him, and it doesn't seem like they're going to extend him. But what about Saquon Barkley going to the Cowboys? That could be interesting.
Yeah, that definitely is something we can watch. If we were looking at the Cowboy side of things, I'm glad you brought that up here because up in the draft, they really like Jonathan Brooks. He's the successor to both Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson from Texas. He's an explosive back. He's a change of pace type guy, but I think he can hold up for what they're looking for. And Tony Pollard is that type of back. So the Cowboys are really interested, from what I've heard, in getting Jonathan Brooks. Makes sense. He's out of Texas, so they've had a good look at him with their inside scouts here. So I think he could be the lead runner. So it's not a great class of rookie running backs, but you have him, you have Blake Corum, who could get some looks here, as well as Braylon Allen, two more Big Ten guys that are going to be in the mix, as well as these veterans. So that could be around as well. And for the Giants, yeah, with Saquon Barkley, if he's not there right now, number 2 on the depth chart is Eric Gray. You have Gary Brightwell. Gray has only shown a little bit there. He's another Oklahoma product that we would think about a little bit more should this change. I don't think Matt Breida is going to get any significant role here without Saquon Barkley. So they'll have to manage, do we want a committee of Brightwell and Gray, or do we invest here and go get Braylon Allen, who's pretty good here out of Wisconsin in the draft, or Corum and some type of back in that sense. So really in any of these situations, they lose a back and there's a little bit of carousel. The ones I think that get lost in shuffle could be going the rookie route, and they'll put more on the radar for us here in 2024.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see all of these changes for the running back. It's going to get confusing at some points. Most of these guys are going to be on new teams, and it just seems like that's the way of the future here. Running backs are going to play on the rookie deal, and then unless they're like absolutely exceptional, they're probably going to move on because teams just don't feel like paying running backs. And I think, unfortunately, I think Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard kind of proved that last year because they all were fighting for that bigger contract, got franchise tag, then Barkley and Josh Jacobs figured out a 1-year deal, but none of them proved that they should have been paid. So they kind of just hurt themselves and the market overall, at least in the near future. Moving on to a quarterback, though. So some good news here. Baker Mayfield, the talks have begun with Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers to, re-sign him. And I do think this is the spot for Baker, right? I think this is where he needs to stay for himself. And I do think that the Buccaneers figured out a good thing here. And I don't know how many other options they have, right? Unless they're going to go pay up for Kirk Cousins. They're not in a prime spot in the draft to take a guy. So I do think it makes sense for them to at least sign Baker Mayfield for another year. As long as they bring back Mike Evans, I think this is the best spot for the team and for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I mean, they're the other team that's been rumored, and it's not really doing much connecting of the dots here. Dave Canales and the Panthers, but he's not going to go back to the Panthers. I mean, that's different. I mean, Mike Evans, he might explore that option or use them at least for leverage for a better deal from the Bucs because they're a division rival. Now, Baker Mayfield, a couple of cautionary tales from last year, and I'll get to one that'll transition in another piece of news related to the Giants. Well, you have Geno Smith, and they had to restructure the contract just now. Here, it was a little inflated, and he came off a great year in a similar system. He was under Canals in Seattle with Shane Waldron, so very parallel thing that we were writing off Geno Smith. He comes back and has a good season, becomes a legitimate starter. The Seahawks pay him decent money. So I think there is that blueprint to say, look, this middle of the pack quarterback isn't too bad if we can build around him and not to break the bank and pay the top market value for a veteran quarterback. So that's why I think the Buccaneers want to keep him. I just think even though they're moving on to new offense, we talked about Liam Cohen coming back if he was with the Rams in Kentucky, that I still think Baker Mayfield is comfortable around on this team. I think that's just a big of a factor that he has good chemistry with the receivers. They like him in the locker room. They feel like they can win with him. Obviously, he's done it last year. So I think all that points to Baker getting a deal, and they've already started talking there. Now, cautionary tale that's a little bit worse, a lot worse than Geno Smith, was Daniel Jones. So we'll see about Daniel Jones. The Giants, I think, could go either way. They're sitting on the number 6 overall pick. It's the sweet spot here. We'd figure that Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jane Daniels could go before that spot, even 1, 2, 3. But then you get into those guys in the next tier, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix. Do you look at those being an option for the Giants? So this is not great for Daniel Jones if they're going to explore the options and they have a pick there to look in. So this Giants team, Michelle, could totally blow up, and it might actually be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Daniel Jones is he probably should have never got the contract. They still owe him a decent amount of money. I think they probably give him one more year unless they feel really, really great about a quarterback that drops to them as well. I don't think they would move up for a guy, spend that when they still have Daniel Jones here. And it's not even like they can get much if they trade Daniel Jones. They're just in a gross spot.
Yeah.
I will say I do feel a little bit different, but for Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith, just for the fact that we've seen Baker have good years, 2020, I believe it was. Like he's had other good years. Even in his rookie year, he showed really greatness that Geno Smith never had shown in his career. He's just been screwed a lot by, I mean, he's had 7 different offensive coordinators in his career and through 6 seasons. And now, of course, Dave Canales left. So it'll be another new coordinator. It is Liam Cohen, who he worked with for like 5 games with the Rams in 2022. But I think Baker deserves about a $25 million contract for 3 years, right? Don't go over crazy, but I think that's what he'll probably get, and he deserves. Vinny, I have some bad news for you that I found a quote from offense coordinator Zach Robinson for the Falcons. I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. But first, let's hear from one of our sponsors. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Read a book, go out to dinner, get a workout in. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. I personally utilize online therapy over the last few years, and it has helped me so much with my anxiety, my irritability, and I cannot say enough good things about my experience. And I believe everyone truly could benefit by going to therapy. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists at any time for no additional cost. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Vinny, here's the bad news. All right, reading some articles. Offensive coordinator Zach Robinson said Kyle Pitts can play just tight end. And then the tight ends coach came in and said, that's Kevin Koger. I believe that's how you say his last name. He said, we're not oblivious to the fact of his skill sets and what he brings as a receiving standpoint. But there's a lot of things we could do with him and get creative with his use in the running game, like more blocking. So he said, you'll see him all over the field, not just out wide, but also in the box. So kind of exactly the opposite of what you wanted, when you heard about the Zach Robinson news.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're going to do with Kyle Pitts. It's all over the place. And the big thing that they're not noticing is he's not a very good blocker. That's not his strength. He's a kind of a glorified wide receiver. Now, the question is, what are they going to do for that third receiver? I think we'll have a lot of tells that way, right? If they're really going after that third receiver, and I think they should get some receiving depth. I mean, again, it's Kadarius Hodge. It really drops off after Drake London on the outside or anywhere. They don't really have good slot play. So I want to see what develops here. It's hard, right? I mean, if they view him as a slot, then it's a good thing. And if they're just trying to do some gamesmanship or whatever, we'll see. But if they're not going to really buy into him, maybe he's a trade candidate. I mean, they'll move him somewhere and say we need to find a more dedicated slot receiver and we want to push our offense in this direction, go get or draft a couple receivers to play with Drake London and push the offense in a completely different direction, because blocking is not a strength. I don't understand that, why they would have a little bit of contradiction on what they're trying to do. So right now, again, the biggest thing I'm going to pay attention with Kyle Pitts going forward, let's watch the practices, OTAs, see what's going on, and whoever they draft a quarterback to replace. That was the other thing that came out, is that Raheem Morris pretty much threw the quarterbacks last year under the bus. So when you look at that, I mean, it really depends. That quarterback could develop chemistry with Drake London, and we might go in that direction. They could stink with Kyle Pitts, right, and not have anything there. So I still think the talent is there. If he gets squandered with this Rams style of offense, I think it's it for Kyle Pitts, and we're moving on in fantasy unless he gets traded. And look, he could have an Evan Ingram second team resurgence, right? That could happen. I mean, Evan Ingram was very frustrating for the Giants. He had flashed a little bit, disappeared, and then the Jaguars helped him. So we might have to hope for that if it doesn't work out this season.
Yeah. I will say when you're looking at the usage, how Arthur Smith used him, he did run the 8th most routes among all tight ends out of the slot. And he did run the 3rd most routes among wide receivers aligned out wide. So he was being used as that receiver and running routes. It's just either it's Kyle Pitts or it's his quarterbacks. I'm more likely to lean on the quarterbacks. We'll see who they bring in. We'll see the upgrade. But this switch to a new coach might not be good things with the way they use him. We got some more news on running backs. So Saints Clint Kubiak, their new OC, he's hoping the new scheme will boost Alvin Kamara late in his career. I call the BS card, all right? Because they could save $11 million if they cut Alvin Kamara with a post-June 1st date, right? His efficiency has dwindled. Even his yards per reception went way down. His touchdowns have disappeared. I just can't imagine being able to save $11 million and instead just deciding to pay Kamara $18 million this year for Alvin Kamara. And we saw it last year. As soon as Derek Carr said, okay, I'm going to stop throwing to Alvin Kamara every 5 seconds. Look, your offense was better. You started scoring points. You started winning games. Crazy how that happens. I call the BS card. I don't think Alvin Kamara is on this team come next year.
Yeah, I know there's a team out there in Denver that pretty much has acquired every Saint person possible that will probably jump on Alvin Kamara once this is done for cheap and just make him the running back over Javonte Williams. But when you look at the Saints, it's hard to tell what they're doing or what they feel like their status is in the league right now. And the one thing we did notice is that we also got a restructure from Derek Carr. So is that enough? Do they have to do a little bit more with Derek Carr to get that right here? So a lot of things to consider. And are they keeping Kamara as part of this because they did this restructure? Are they going to find their money elsewhere? I'm not sure, but it seems silly not to take $11 million. But that said, the Saints might feel like, wait, we underachieved last season. We found our groove late. We're still maybe the team that we should be winning the NFC South. So they feel like we need to turn the page and blow things up. And I've seen some mock drafts take a quarterback here. I don't know if the Saints actually are in that mode or they feel like they're in that mode. So that's what it all comes down to. Do the Saints think they're rebuilding or do they think Kamara can help them win? And if they think they're rebuilding, then the obvious move is moving Kamara. So we'll see. But I think overall, going back to Clint Kubiak, I think his scheme is going to be better for wherever they run. And we talked about Kendra Miller. He was one of your favorite sleeper bounce back players to watch. And if they move Kamara, obviously he would shoot up quickly here over Jamal Williams, who might be a casualty as well for this team.
Yeah, and unfortunately, so the Saints aren't going to rebuild. They never are going to, right? They always kick the cap down the road, and their fans are always like, "Ha, see, the cap doesn't exist." It's like, yeah, but you can never sign players, and you're going to always then be 9-8, 9-8, especially since you have Derek Carr. They are the Pittsburgh Steelers of the NFC, and they're going to be happy to be 9-8. Hopefully, they can get into, their goal is to just get into the playoffs, get killed in the wild card round, and that's what's going to happen. That is their ceiling. And they're going to keep doing that with how they're going right now. So maybe they keep Alvin Kamara, but that's a losing mentality in my mind. So we'll see what they do there. And then one last piece of news with running backs here. Apparently, the Seahawks want to focus more on the running game with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, which makes sense. Geno Smith isn't good. And I think you should focus on the running game. And then that will open up things for DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett and help Geno Smith out. But I will say they've had issues staying healthy, right? Both Walker and Charbonnet did last year. That's the key. Walker needs to stay healthy. And if he can do that, he should have a super nice fantasy year.
Yeah. Has there ever been a defensive coach hired on a team that doesn't say they want to run the ball and be more physical? I mean, it's all the time, right? That's the first thing. And Mike McDonald said that. Interesting that they did hire the offensive coordinator from Washington, and we know what they did with Michael Penix and Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk and some of the Jalen McMillan and all the weapons that they had there. So you think, okay, they're going to make a wide open offense, but maybe this is an indictment on Geno Smith, right? We're not sure what he can do too much downfield. Is our best path to winning him throwing the ball all over? Probably not. Right. And their defense needs a little bit more protecting. You think they'd upgrade the pass rush, get the front straightened out here for Mike McDonald based on what he's used to with the Ravens, work on the secondary a little bit more. So, and that's what he's going to know, right? That's how the Ravens won a lot of games. I'm not going to say that Lamar Jackson is going to help Geno Smith inspire him to run, but I think they can take from the fact that the running game was big for the Ravens last year. So that could really be good news for Kenneth Walker. They just need to keep him on the field. He needs to stay on the field. I think he's a better talent than Charbonnet. We've seen them both, and I think Walker still got that special juice here. So I'd love to see it. I'd love to see them give them more of an opportunity. And part of this is the Seahawks playing with the lead, playing better defense. That's going to help Walker get those carries as well.
Yeah, I would love to see them go more. I mean, it would stink against for Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba, but I think their best case of winning, right, is focusing on playing good defense and running the ball with your really talented running backs. That both of these guys are more than capable of leading a backfield. So if you can have them both back there, that would only be great. Shortly here, we're going to get into Justin Fields because I want to hear your thoughts on if you think there's a slight chance that he could stay with the Bears.
Yeah, we'll look into that and see what's up with Kirk Cousins, the other free agent running back or quarterback as well. All right, we've got the NFL season wrapped up here, but it's the heart of the NBA season. We're past the All-Star break. So get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. I've got one that I'm looking at here for a game, and the Hornets really struggle here with power forwards and letting them score. They're playing Giannis and the Bucks. I do love a little double-double action parlay with Giannis going the over there at 29.5 points, 11.5 rebounds. That's where I'm going with Giannis over against the Hornets for the Bucks. That's my favorite play here for your parlays and props there to check out. You can see so much more at FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we said we would get into Justin Fields, and we'll do that in a moment. Let's just get this piece of news out of the way. It looks like the Vikings, as you kind of suggested here, Michelle, that Kirk Cousins looks like he could be re-signed. He's throwing, by the way, and showing that he's like Aaron Rodgers. I can heal quickly from a torn Achilles too. I can be out there on the field. So he's put out some video like that. So maybe to inspire the Vikings, maybe to rush their decision. On the bad news, Michelle, on the same team, TJ Hawkinson, multiple knee injury there. Doesn't look good. Right now they're saying he's going to need some time to recover. So that could change the way we consider tight ends. It could be October before we see him on the field. So interesting pieces of news coming there. But I think we'll go with the positive. I think Kirk Cousins legitimately might be back with the Vikings.
Yeah, and again, the Cousins, just like Baker Mayfield's best landing spot is the Buccaneers. The best landing spot for Cousins is by far the Vikings. He has an extremely strong connection with Justin Jefferson. Yeah, it stinks TJ Hawkinson might not be there for the first month, but he also now has Jordan Addison. I'm sure they'll bring in other pieces as well. We'll see who they bring as in at running back, but maybe someone that can catch some passes back there for him as well. So that Hawkinson news is going to be tough, especially if we don't have a time when he'll be back. Like if he gets put on the PUP list before we start drafting, then okay, we know he'll be out for at least the first 4 weeks. But I mean, he's a top tier fantasy tight end, right? So this is going to be something we have to consider how far do we let him drop? Because obviously with this injury, if he's not ready to go in the start of the season, then you're going to be taking Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, definitely over Hawkinson, probably Evan Ingram too, just because like if he's going to be out a month. Dalton Kincaid, right? Like would you still go Kincaid over Hawkinson at that point?
Yeah, that'll be a tough one to look at. I'd have to see what the Bills do. Obviously, adding other pieces here as we go forward. If they add a first-round receiver, I might be cooling off on Dalton Kincaid. But you'd have to treat him much like Kyler Murray, I think. Like if we did this year at quarterback, where I think you stash him, but make sure you have enough options and do have a shot to strike, but don't put yourself behind and miss 4 or 5 games with the guy, and then you're stuck. I think I would make sure I get an upside option. Maybe it's a Brock Bowers later in the draft. Just get a guy that you can plug and play there for a few weeks and maybe stream a little bit. But yeah, I would drop him, but I wouldn't go too far down. I mean, wherever you took Kyler Murray among the quarterbacks, I think that's what you would do with TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah. Say you're sitting there in like round 8 and Kyle Pitts and Hawkinson are both sitting there. Which one would you take?
I
Let's
think
say
Hawkinson.
let's say we got news that he'll be back by week 5 at the latest. Would you
Yeah,
go
I'm going
Hawkinson?
Hawkinson there. I think I'm not crazy about Kyle Pitts. Look, I'm not that nuts. I mean, it's a backdoor sleeper at the best here, and we're just going by what we're learning right now. But Hawkinson, I know, right? It's the same offense. When he comes back, I know exactly what you're going to get. I think he'll be right there in the top 3 options with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. We're not going to have KJ Osborne in this mix anymore. He's a free agent. So I know exactly what I'm good with Hawkinson. I don't have to guess, right? There's too many factors I got to figure out right now on Kyle Pitts to do that. So I think Hawkinson missing time is a bird in the hand that I want to go after. But yeah, make sure you have streamers and other guys available to you. But still long ways to figure that out.
Yeah, and I will say Jordan Addison gets a bump if Hawkinson's going to miss
Yeah.
some time.
Yeah, definitely. Good call there. And the other issue that we have in the NFC North with a quarterback is Justin Fields. Now, Ryan Poles, the general manager of the Bears, he said they want to do right by Justin Fields. If they're going to go ahead and proceed with Caleb Williams, or we presume it's Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall pick, regardless of franchise quarterback they're going to take there, they want to give Justin Fields fair warning to find a new team. So I don't know what that means. Do they have an opportunity to give him a fair warning? And then they also said we need to get the right price to trade the number 1 pick. So is it lining up where they have the right price for Fields and they're waiting to have a few teams bid? I don't know. Or they're going to just surprise everyone and keep Justin Fields. So I would say right now, if I had to put a percentage on it, I'd say it's about, I'll say 80 to 85% they're trading Fields and about 20 to 15% that they're trading the number 1 pick. I just think the better path already exists going for that rookie contract. If it's compensation that's somewhat similar, you've got to go for Williams because I think he just has a higher ceiling and maybe a higher floor than Justin Fields.
That's really it, right? I think Fields does have a high ceiling. I'm a big Fields supporter, and I say that, and I still think the Bears need to move on.
Yeah.
You don't have this opportunity, like it's very rare to have the opportunity to have the first overall pick. It's also rare to have it in a loaded quarterback class where you get to choose who you want out of this class, and with a prospect as good as Caleb Williams. And just thinking about the pay difference too, like they got to move forward. And again, don't come at me. I really like Justin Fields, but let me just go through this real quick. Just since he in his career, so he entered in 2021, this is his ranks in the NFL among qualified quarterbacks. So completion percentage, second worst, better than only Zach Wilson. Passing yards per game, last, better than nobody. Pass touchdown to interception ratio, third worst, better than only Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. Passer rating, second worst, better than only Zach Wilson. Sacks taken, most. Like that's hard to debate with, right? Like his stats have been really bad and they have gotten a little bit better every year. I'll say that. And quarters 1 through 3 this past year, he was very, very solid. 16 touchdowns, 4 giveaways throughout the year in quarters 1 through 3. Completion percentage up to 65, 97.3 passer rating. The fourth quarter, a 51.1 completion percentage, 53 passer rating, 4 total touchdowns to 9 interceptions. The Bears ended up losing 3 games that they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. And that was Fields was playing all those games. In those games that they lost, that they had a 10+ point lead, Fields had 3 giveaways in the fourth quarter and a 13 passer rating. You could throw the ball on the ground over and over and over and over again and have a better passer rating than 13.1 passer rating in the fourth quarter over those 3 games. So I do think he has his shortcomings. I hope he's on a new team next year and gets another chance, but it's time for the Bears to move on.
Yeah, and for fantasy football, he's been part of the so-called cheat code with his running, and that's been helpful for his numbers. But you're right. We want to see him clean it up a little bit. We just want to see him in an offense where they're not forcing him out of what he does, right? If your strength is running, incorporate that. I mean, find a way like Lamar Jackson to keep up the running, but figure out a way to make him a more efficient passer. Then he could be a fantasy football superstar where if he's putting up some numbers and having some runs, like he always has a potential for 60 to 100 yards on the ground, and he's throwing for 250 and 2 with some of the weapons that he might have on his new team, then you're in business here. So he just doesn't have to do too much more, right, in terms of fantasy to produce. But the rub is he's got to do enough in reality to keep his job and do the things that are needed there to keep putting up those numbers. So very interesting developments here with Justin Fields. We'll be waiting. We can get that news at any time, but we've heard the rumor teams. Now it's in the Bears' court to make that move. Now, finally, the Rams made a seemingly minor move here, but they did re-sign DeMarcus Robinson. Marcus Robinson was a sneaky good fantasy performer last year behind Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. This is what this offense wants to do, throw the ball around to three guys. I'm not saying DeMarcus Robinson's a guy we're going to draft necessarily, but he's a guy that I think still has some value, and I think he's important to keep up the value as a third receiver for Nacua and Kupp.
Yeah, especially if you play in best ball leagues. I think Robinson could be a sneaky last pick because there's like 18 rounds in those if you're playing in the best ball tournaments. But so, I mean, for the majority of the season, he didn't play at all, right? He didn't have more than 10 snaps in any game until week 12. And then all of a sudden, he ended up getting playing time with injuries to different wide receivers. I think they kind of realized, Van Jefferson's not it. He's a free agent. I don't think they re-signed him, right? Tutu Atwell, he's not it. Cooper Kupp is getting older. So, yeah, do I still think Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are going to be the top targets? 1,000%. But DeMarcus Robinson could really be the third target in this offense with Matthew Stafford. Tyler Higbee should not be a top 3 target on any team. They don't really utilize the running back too much. And we saw him getting a solid amount of targets towards the end of the year. 10 targets in week 14, 6 in week 16, 10 in week 17, 6 in the playoff game. And he had 4 touchdowns during that span from weeks 12 through 16. So Matthew Stafford was looking for him. I do think he could be a sneaky last pick of fantasy drafts next year.
Yeah, you wonder why the Chiefs didn't keep him, but that's a different story. I mean, he wasn't nearly as good as the Chiefs, but sometimes it's finding the right fit in the offense and an offense that's going to get you the ball. That's definitely what happened with DeMarcus Robinson. But yeah, minor piece of news, but still, regardless, it's important to know about all these things. We're going to keep you informed all offseason long, and this is just the start here. We got a lot more draft talk, a lot more free agency talk, so it's going to be a fun offseason, Michelle.
Oh, absolutely. Got the combine coming up here starting tomorrow, and we got drills starting on Thursday. Will be a great time. That is it for today's show. Thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinny and I will be back tomorrow discussing more fantasy goodness. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.
See you.